ADHD Rewired, episode 431. This is the podcast for those of us with really good intentions and a slightly wandering attention. I'm Eric Tivers. I'm a licensed clinical social worker by training and a coach by design. I'm your host, and I have ADHD. ADHD Rewired is more than just a podcast. We are a community. We are wired for connection, and you are not alone. Go to ADHDrewired.com to learn how you can join us in our free and secret Facebook group. Get additional resources for every episode, including links to any resources we mention on today's show. You can support us on Patreon, sign up for our email newsletter. You can request podcast postcards to distribute to your clients and support groups. Learn all about our award-winning coaching and accountability groups. You can co-work with us in our Adult Study Hall virtual membership community. You can do all of these things by going to our website at ADHDrewired.com. We know that starting is the hardest part, so let's get started. Welcome back to another episode of ADHD Rewired. Today's guest is Jason Boughn. Jason is a life coach specializing in tools to address ADHD. He also welcomes neurodiversity of all types and neurotypical people, as long as the fit is tight. Jason has a comfortable way of evoking a person's story, getting to the heart of the matter most relevant to the storyteller. The stories we tell ourselves and the ones created to fit in better with others are affirmations which shape our reality. Jason's focus is exploring and reframing our personal story to create a beautiful life experience. Jason, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, Eric. Thank you for having me here.
My pleasure. So you have a really, really interesting story, interesting backstory.
Oh, shucks.
And, so you went from, you had a brain injury, and how long ago was that?
Well, actually, I've had a few. I had a major fall on the ice, though, in about 2017. And that was the major one. I had an auto accident in 2013. I was in grad school, and my life rapidly changed after that, but I really didn't understand what was going on until several years later when I went to see a functional medicine doctor to find out about the possibility of having ADHD. And he did a brain scan and some other things and some testing and asked me if I'd ever had a concussion. And I was like, no. And he said, are you sure? Did you play any athletics or anything in school? And I said, well, I was a martial artist most of my life, since 13, a lot of hardcore throws and punches and stuff. And well, yeah, I guess I probably did hit the ground a few times pretty hard. And yeah, I might've gotten rattled a bit. And he says, what about car accidents? Oh yeah, I had this big car accident. And he started asking me some questions about my experience with that and how it affected my world. And after hearing my story and explaining to me what he noticed during my functional medicine evaluation, he suggested that I go get tested for brain injury. And it wasn't long after that, ironically, that I had a fall on the ice and really got rattled. So here we are on that journey.
So how would you say that it's something that you had over the course of your life, but understanding that now, how would you say that's impacted you?
Well, it's interesting because I've learned that, well, first of all, I was late diagnosed with ADHD, as I said. So my whole life, living with ADHD undiagnosed and living with brain injuries throughout my younger life and not knowing, I didn't know any better. And since I've learned that the manifestations of ADHD are really similar to the manifestations of TBI, especially with regards to, say, executive function and comprehension of time, and also the vestibular system and balance and memory and all sorts of things.
It's my dad who had a TBI. He had an aneurysm in his brainstem probably almost 30 years ago now. And I definitely got my ADHD from him. So it was like it very much compounded all of those challenges.
Exactly.
So everything. And the thing that I think was most impacted for him anyways, and I don't know if it was the same for you, was just that kind of emotional self-regulation piece. Like growing up, my dad was the one who could always, like, I could push every button and he would just stay cool and calm. Like it didn't, the stuff that I would pull didn't really faze him. Right. And, after he had his brain injuries and surgery. Just he emotionally was very different.
Interesting. Well, as I said, I was a martial artist for most of my life. So I was introduced to meditation at age 12. And so that's been a part of my life. And I've felt pretty good with my emotions for the most part. Relationships, maybe not so strong all the time, but emotions pretty much doing well. But I found that emotional dysregulation is definitely an issue. And I'm definitely surprised by the overwhelming sensations that I get sometimes that don't really match the circumstance. And I'm definitely an emotional person. And most people would describe me as very joyful and very calm and easygoing. For the most part, I am. But I've noticed oftentimes an overwhelming sense of sadness, especially. It's a melancholy that it sort of underlines things, even in the most joyous of times. It's sort of I've come to understand that it has to do with many things, including maybe a mourning of loss for the person that I once was, and the opportunities that maybe I have missed due to my both ADHD and brain injury. All the things that could have been, all the ways that I've been misunderstood.
What's coming up for you now? It looks like you're getting a little emotional just sharing this.
Yeah, that's interesting, isn't it? And that's not dysregulation. I'm just really thinking about that. I don't know about you, but I am really in touch with my body, and so when I sense an emotion, it's everything, right? It's my whole world. And so I was just thinking then, just how many times I've heard, I have so much potential,
Mm.
or Jason, you have so much potential. How come you missed this assignment, or how come you forgot to bring this thing, or how come you didn't show up to this, or how come it's just so many things that those are such, oh gosh, they sound so trivial when I say them like that, but they're everyday things that we face. And as neurodiverse people, sometimes we just don't match up to the expectations that we have for ourselves and that others have for us as well. There's just a huge amount of disappointment and not fitting in. And as well loved as I have been in my life, and I've had some good close relationships and friendships and things along the way, I've still felt just
Misunderstood.
different for sure. Of course, I'm a gregarious, joyful, redheaded guy, and so people always thought it was an alien or a leprechaun, or at least from Europe. But and again, not knowing throughout most of my life, it was easy just to sort of fall into that character and appreciate those things and think, oh yeah, I'm I kind of lost my thought there, but
It's
fall
it's
in that
it's
that
like you have
that
ADHD or something.
exactly right, like as if I had ADHD.
You said you would fall into this character. You also said that you were doing some acting professionally for a while.
Yeah. But about the character there, it's what I mean is that there's not an explanation for it, and so you just kind of take it. At least I did, and a lot of us do feel that we take it as a character flaw, and so we fall into that character with those flaws, and we don't realize that there's actually a reason, and that with treatment and tools and conversation and a little self love, those things don't have to rule your life and ruin a life in some cases. As far as acting, I fell into acting through martial arts. It was kind of a fluke. I started out with a little improv work, and I didn't even do any scripted acting for many years after that. But acting for me wasn't so much about playing a character as much as it was listening and tuning into the experience on stage, right? So my way of doing things was to, even in a scripted scene, I wouldn't learn the other character's lines. I would just know mine, and I would know where my character was coming from and what their place was in the scene. And that way, the things that happened and the things people said and the things they did were fresh,
Oh,
and that I could
interesting.
react in a very genuine way. And I would even surprise myself sometimes, and it would create just new, fresh opportunities. And for me, that was a fun and alive way to be, rather than trying to fit myself into a mold of a character that a writer was trying to create,
It almost sounds like you worked really hard to give yourself this treat of novelty,
Yeah, well
right?
spotted, sir. Yeah.
Learning all of your stuff, but like knowing that, all right, I'm bringing in my portion, and I'm going to be surprised here on stage. That's really interesting. I wonder how common that might be.
I don't think it is very common at all. And in fact, I pissed off a few directors along the way.
Yeah. What happened?
Well, I had one director for sure. Well, thankfully, my first scripted role, that director let me go. She realized that She was just like, it was better just not to give me blocking on stage or things to do, gestures or anything. Just let me go and have everybody else block around me. And that was just the best way for me to be. And the very next show I was in, the director was not like that at all. They had very specific places they wanted me to stand, very specific ways they wanted me to deliver certain lines, very specific gestures and things. And I hated it. It did not go well at all.
Well, it's funny. I remember right before I decided to go back to grad school, I auditioned for a spot in this reggae band as a keyboard player.
Wow.
And I got offered the gig. I did end up turning it down. And one of the main reasons I ended up turning it down is because the leader of the band wanted the keyboard parts played in exactly a certain way. And I was like, I don't even know if I could do that if I wanted to. So I totally get that.
Wow. As a musician, I'm not a musician, but I can imagine that'd be tough.
Well, I mean, I think it depends on your background and how you kind of come into it. You know, I came in by playing by ear, and so I do a lot of improvisation. But if you want something played in exactly a certain way, I'm like, you might need someone else.
That's so true. And in the martial arts, it's funny because I studied very classical martial arts that had really specific ways they wanted things done too. So in that regard, I would be frustrating to many of my instructors and things, and even to myself. But when it was time for me to just do things, if I was teaching a class or if I was simply reacting in a technique or something, it gave me a huge advantage because my rhythm was way different than anybody else's. And even I didn't know what was coming next. I was so brilliant that I would fool even myself. Kidding.
No,
but you know what I mean? It's like you really open yourself up to that spontaneous magic in the moment. That's something we can tap into as neurodiverse people really naturally when you're not trying to jam yourself into a certain form.
Well, and I think that speaks to one of the common strengths or assets that we see with neurodivergent brains, and that is divergent thinking, right? So you have your divergent thinking where it's like it's very relational. This idea generates ideas around this, and that, and then those ideas generate ideas, which a lot of people can't do. You know, how to really harness that is being able to sort of switch between convergent, which is more that linear thinking, and divergent, which is more that relational thinking. So when we can sort of identify when we are in each mode and switch between, that's a really powerful skill, and one that could absolutely be developed. And I think the first thing we need to do is be able to name what we're doing and how we're approaching whatever it is that we're doing.
Oh, you're absolutely right. In fact, that's been such a huge struggle for me. And I again, just lost it, Eric.
It's par for the course.
Give me a clue what you just said.
Usually I turn the transcripts on so I can answer that question of what did we just say? Because it's like it's the hardest question that I get asked is what did I just say? So I'm going to turn the transcripts on now. We're going to take a quick break to recover from this getting a little derailed.
Okay.
And
alrighty.
And we will be right back. Have you ever wondered if it's possible to live the kind of life you want to with ADHD? What would it be worth it to you if you were able to work alongside other adults with ADHD, to be understood and accepted, and to finally tap into the potential you didn't even know you had? Do you have a vision of where you want to be, but you're feeling stuck because you aren't quite sure where to start? Then join us this summer for ADHD Rewired's award-winning coaching and accountability groups to get unstuck by joining the coaching groups and the community built just for you.
I joined this group because I was exhausted trying to do everything myself. And I knew I needed community and a group to journey with in my struggles.
Before this group, I was busy but not efficient.
I joined the group for all the tricks of how to plan, and they work.
Increasing my time awareness without being stressed is such a big win for me.
What I learned in the course of this group is that change comes much more fluidly with less resistance and more acceptance of self.
Yeah, like learning to plan. Planning was probably my biggest thing, and the importance of, daily planning and thinking that through, whether it's the night before, the day or the morning of, and then also yearly planning and how much that's going to affect me in the future.
Things that I've learned is scheduling, not over scheduling, time management, and how to plan for the future.
I think that I've made strides that would have taken me 10 years, if not more, if I weren't in this group.
I discovered hope and the possibility of change around things that I was convinced were immovable.
They just taught me to be compassionate with myself and to say, hey, this is a process.
So many times in my life, I really didn't know what I was getting myself into. Only this time I'm grateful.
Group has been a life-changing experience for me.
This is the place, if you have ADHD, to be.
And I just want to thank everybody for being here because it's so powerful to just listen and be with everybody else.
Head on over now to coachingrewired.com and join our next registration event this Thursday, June 2nd at 9 a.m. Central. That's this Thursday, June 2nd at 7 a.m. Pacific, 10 a.m. Eastern. Registration is by invitation only. Go to coachingrewired.com and get your name on our interest list and watch your email for instructions. Every season, our coaching members work together to learn how to ask better questions, plan their days, weeks, months, and discover that they do not have to do any of this alone. If you want to join us this summer, then head on over now to coachingrewired.com to sign up to receive your invitation for our next summer registration event this Thursday, June 2nd at 7 a.m. Pacific, 10 a.m. Eastern. To start your pre-registration process, when you go to coachingrewired.com, click on the teal button at the top of the page to sign up for this week's summer registration event on June 2nd. Once you've confirmed your email, you'll receive instructions with everything you'll need to submit before receiving your invitation. You can join me or one of our amazing coaches this summer with sessions starting at 6 a.m. Pacific, 9 Eastern. Check the website for our specific section dates and times and find the time that works for you. Take the leap, kickstart your personal growth, and harness the power of community by going now to coachingrewired.com and get registered for our next summer registration event this Thursday, June 2nd at 9 a.m. Central. That's this Thursday, June 2nd at 7 a.m. Pacific, 10 a.m. Eastern. If you're hearing this after the fact, go to the website to see when our next event is. Come grow with us. That's coachingrewired.com. All right, we are back. So we were just right before the break talking about divergent and convergent thinking before our own minds got scattered and we forgot where we were. But we are back here. So what I'd like to actually do is shift a little bit because I want to hear more of your story. You said you were married twice. There's a period of time where you're actually homeless, right?
Mm-hmm.
Tell us about that.
Sure. And in typical ADHD form, I remember what I was going to say, just that the problem with that diverse thinking and the generation of ideas and things is that even in casual note-taking, it's hard because I'll think of something and I'll write it down. And before I'm even done writing it down, I've thought of another thing that connects to it. And then all of a sudden there's all kinds of things. And then so consequently, there are pages and pages and pages of notes that are just in the moment, just bridges of ideas and generational fractals of thought patterns and things. It's amazing.
You just described my actual, the frustration of my writing process is I'll be halfway done with the sentence and I'll have 4 other thoughts about what I want to write next. But that derailed the second half of the sentence that I was still writing. And now I'm like, wait, what was I going to say?
For sure.
It's so frustrating.
Wow. And that's something that I think we're not alone with. And being in coaching school for ADHD life coaching has been...
I don't think we had mentioned that yet, that you are actually studying to be an ADHD coach.
Well, yes, I am. In fact, that's been a life-changing event in itself. And it's really recent for me. Oh boy. In typical ADHD fashion, again, I just don't know where to start with the story. It's so huge in so many parts. It's like a spiral and we can just drop in anywhere and start talking from there. But my journey to get to this schooling, even over the last few years, you mentioned, some of the struggles that I'd gone through, and those were very recent. So this has all led up to where I'm at right now in kind of a whirlwind. But I'll tell you, I've always been a person who loves learning things, and I could get by in school sometimes, rather well somehow, but I didn't like the rigid form of it and all that goes along with it. And so what I'm saying is I love this schooling. For one thing, being in an atmosphere of other people who are neurodiverse and understand and are tolerant.
Isn't that amazing? Being around other neurodivergent folks, it's just feeling understood. I don't need to explain myself.
Totally. I mean, that's why I reached out to you, is because I really love how you've embraced that. You've built yourself a community around those, your people.
Yeah, absolutely.
I hope to do the same thing.
And it's a great community. So let me kind of guide you through to sort of navigate the story a little bit. So,
all right,
married twice. Talk a little bit about that.
Sure. Married right during college, first time around in college, and that was fairly short-lived. I'll tell you what, no matter how things have turned out in any relationship, I've been with some of the most amazing human beings I could possibly imagine. And so whatever didn't go well in either marriage or other relationships has nothing to do with the quality of me as a person or them. So there's no way that my first wife and I would have got along. That needed to end.
How long were you dating before you decided to get married to your first?
Oh gosh, man, this is a hard question. Thinking about recalling times and events and things like that is not my forte. So I don't know. We dated probably a couple of years, and then we moved in together, and maybe a year later or something, we got married, and a couple of years later we split or divorced. But we were young, and we both had those classical ideas of family that were instilled in us by our parents. Have kids, have a house, each of you, doing the family responsibility things. And that just, I think that was a growth period for me. It was like, it was definitely a discovery that life wasn't exactly what people told me it was.
What was it?
Well, I found that I had a lot of freedom. Choosing to divorce my first wife was amazing. It was almost like I was getting crushed underneath a car or something. And eventually, like I just found the strength to push the car off, not because of her or anything, but because of the weight of the expectations of how life should turn out and what things should be, and what we're supposed to do in the world with ourselves. And I recognized that something wasn't right. It had to change. It was the hardest thing for me to do, was to decide that we needed to divorce, and then to tell her that. It was awful.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it was so liberating, and it paved the way to me accepting my own creativity, I suppose, and taking responsibility for having joy in my life on my own terms.
Yeah, I can, as someone who's divorced not that long ago, I can relate very much to that. So it's yeah. All right. So then you got divorced and then remarried.
Yeah, there was a lot of life that happened between then and now, right?
Okay.
As I said before, time is meaningless to me. It's so difficult for me to recall the timeline of my life. So there's maybe bound to be some inconsistencies and stuff. And I could say that it's just hard for me to kind of put that in perspective. But basically, I dove really deeply into my martial arts study, and I found acting. And through my travels and things, I found I met my next wife many years later, and we actually met on stage. I threw a dagger in her neck, and we fell in love. And we were working at the Renaissance Festival, and so we were doing some stage combat stuff.
Oh, fun!
So, yeah, it was so cool. We had a really good time together. We did a lot of theater together and stage combat. She was an awesome martial artist that trained along with me for many years, and yeah, that was a great relationship. In fact, we were together, married for about 20 years. So that's
not a short.
That was a completely different experience.
Yeah. And are you comfortable sharing what happened?
Well, actually, we were so amazing together. We worked together really well. I don't know. Again, I wasn't aware of any of my own neurodiverse issues, and certainly not hers. But whatever we had it worked well together, except functionally. We were a joyful, magical couple, but man, we just couldn't keep our finances straight, and we just didn't influence each other's to be as awesome as we could have been in every way. So I don't know. During grad school, for acupuncture is when I had my car accident that I was talking about in 2011. And when that happened, I grad school will take a toll on anybody who goes, and any student, right? But it just made me, again, re-examine all the things that were working and were not working in my world. And I just realized that I needed to make a big change if I wanted to be what I envisioned myself to be. And that, same would be true for her. So we stayed friends for many years, and we it was largely amicable. And then when I had my fall, she was there, and we weren't married or even together, but she was there. And I went to the emergency room sometime after the fall with some complications. And during the visit to the ER, I passed out and I flatlined. And there's a story behind that that's kind of interesting, but basically I wasn't feeling well. And next thing I knew, I woke up and there were 7 people surrounding me, and someone was pumping my chest. And, ex-wife was sitting in the room, she was just crying her eyes out. And she told me later that she thought, I was gone. And it was, how did
that affect you?
I don't really know. I still don't know really. Well, that was my, I've always been a health conscious person, and I've been very fit, and going to acupuncture school really changed my life with health. I lost about 70 pounds through some things I learned there, but still I wasn't really healthy, and I wasn't as conscious about how I was living really. And so something about that incident made me take a different approach. I quit drinking entirely. And I turned ketogenic, basically. A modified keto diet is what I kind of went for. And that's made a huge difference in my life, both those things. Not drinking alcohol, losing sugar, eating high fats, low carbs, and getting exercise every day is how I started living. And those have made such a huge difference in my brain and my life and everything. I'm not saying that any specific diet is right for everybody, but once you dial that in, that means a lot. Man, especially sugar and alcohol are not good for the ADHD brain.
Well, yeah, no, I'm very affected by food. So I have to be pretty cognizant of what I'm eating, because it's some of the most delicious foods make me feel like absolute crap. And it's like, I don't like feeling like absolute crap. Right. And needing to be very, very mindful of that. So this was in 2017, right? That you had,
I think so.
Okay. Give or take a decade. I don't know. When was it that you were homeless for a year?
That was so unexpected, because I'm not the kind of person that ever thought I would wind up in that situation. I grew up in a fairly privileged household. No matter what's happened, I've always had a roof over my head and never had any danger of it being otherwise. So there came a point not long after I got my ADHD diagnosis, just several months later, where my ex-wife and I had been living together. We're still friends. And so we actually stayed living together for a little while to save on rent and things. And anyhow, not long after my diagnosis, we had to move. So we decided not to live together anymore. And I was living on my own for the first time in a long time. And I was still trying to dial in my meds and things. Then one day I went to the doctor for my monthly visit to get my med renewals. And she told me that I was on a high amount of stimulants, and that her practice was going to be in jeopardy because of that. And so that she had to take me off one of those stimulants, and I had to pick one. And I was like, what do you mean? They're not a treat. How am I supposed to pick which medication I'm supposed to delete from my friend? It's not even dialed in yet.
It's not like you're telling me that I can only have one donut. It's like,
right? Which is the funny thing, Eric, right? I mean, it's like, I don't get any euphoria or kick out of the stimulants. It's like, I get more calm. I've gone to sleep right after taking Adderall. Before. So there's no treat aspect to it. It's a matter of living life better. And anyway, so she took away one of the meds, and long story short, I completely fell apart. I wasn't able to think my way out of a paper bag in some cases, and my emotions were so out of whack, and just things fell apart, and I couldn't make my rent where I was staying, and she couldn't keep me there, and I had nowhere to go. It was not long after I had left social media and really walked away from all of my friendships and everything that I had had in the past, because they really just, they weren't serving me. And they didn't have what seemed to me any empathy to my diagnosis. And so I didn't have anybody. So I didn't have anywhere to be. I didn't ever go to a homeless shelter. I just couldn't do it. The amount of stimulation and stuff was just too much. And I never considered myself as, a permanently homeless person. It was always just a moment in time. And I was always looking for the way to get my meds back in order and to keep going. So somehow I really don't know how or how long it took or whatever, but there were many days of no sleep. But after about a year, I found my way to earn a little money, and I rented a car and started driving rideshare like Lyft and Uber and stuff, and living out of my car until I got connected with some resources and things. And now I'm thankfully living with the help of Housing and Human Services in a housing for elderly and disabled, thanks to my brain injury and ADHD.
Let's take a quick break. And when we come back, I want to hear how you got from there to where you are today. So we will be right back. Support for ADHD Rewired comes from our Patreon community. If you want to support the show and grab some extra perks, then consider becoming a patron over at ADHDrewired.com/Patreon. Support can start at any amount, and perks start at just $5 a month, where you can get ad-free episodes of this show in your very own patron-only podcast feed. And you can join me every fourth Tuesday of the month for only $25 a month for our patron-only monthly coaching call at 3 p.m. Central, that's 1 p.m. Pacific, 4 p.m. Eastern. If you miss our Patreon coaching call, or the $10 a month range is more in your budget, you can get the audio recording of our monthly coaching calls and our ad-free episodes from our private podcast feed, and get even more value as a patron and get 1 month free when you choose to pay for a year at a time instead of going month to month. No matter your contribution, I am really grateful for your support. And if you're able to right now, if it's in the cards for you, consider becoming a patron. Your support helps us reach more ADHD brains, because we want all of our ADHD friends around the world to know that you are not alone. Consider becoming a patron and find all of the perks at ADHDrewired.com/Patreon. That's ADHDrewired.com/Patreon. And thanks. Support for ADHD Rewired comes from Adult Study Hall at adultstudyhall.com. From our weekly guided sessions known as ASH Plus, or ASH's Adult Study Hall, to our 24/7 drop-in room. This just might be the virtual community you didn't even know you needed. And it's only $19.99 a month, and it's free to try for the first week. If you're motivated by working with others who are working on the same thing you are, you can join our themed and guided sessions, or our ASH Plus sessions, for decluttering, writing, taking care of our finances, working out, creating, and weekly check-ins. We also have our career-focused weekly sessions led by our very own coach, Kat Hoyer. And if you prefer to work at your own pace, but still the good company of all other people, then pop into our 24/7 drop-in room, ASH 24/7. It's open 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Join the virtual co-working community created just for us by going to adultstudyhall.com. Give it a try. It is free for the first week and only $19.99 a month after that. That's adultstudyhall.com. We are back with Jason Boughn. So Jason, I have to imagine that being homeless for a year is one of those kind of life-shaping experiences that maybe you wouldn't wish it on your worst enemy, but like, what are the things that you look at it now, and like, what did it teach you?
A lot. It gave me a lot of perspective and on how easy it is for someone to just lose everything. So I'm really grateful. I have a lot of gratitude and perspective, I suppose, and also a lot of willingness to help other people to not have to go through the same sort of thing. It's not easy to navigate resources and to get the help you need, especially when you're struggling with mental illness or physical issues. When you have to be your own advocate in a situation where the advocacy depends on doing things that you're having trouble doing, it's kind of a spiral of doom. And so I can see how people get stuck in being homeless or other situations. Thankfully, I didn't have any addiction issues. Like I said, I quit drinking many years ago, so that I'm glad that I didn't even have something like that to fall back on. I had to be real vigilant and to be real focused and face what was real and what was going on, and knowing that, being in that situation for myself wasn't defining who I was. It was just lessons that I had to go through, and things I had to shed. I got rid of all of my possessions and everything. And that is just such amazing thing that I think a lot of people have trouble with letting go of their possessions. And if you just, try going minimalist for a month, you'll see how tough that can be. And so, I just, life doesn't have to be suffering. I've seen how much creative neurodiverse people can suffer when they really have so much to offer. They're really carrying, I'm generalizing, right? But carrying creative, thoughtful, intelligent people. And when you don't fit in, it's easy just to give up. I don't want people to do that. I really want to take my experiences and my difficulties with navigating resources and advocacy and things, and helping other people to connect with what they need to discover how to live a life that is most beautiful and meaningful to them.
You had told me when we first talked that you sort of identify as a very spiritual person. Have you always been that way, or was there lessons that life kind of threw at you that kind of brought you to that place?
Nah, I've always been that way. I'm a Scorpio. I've got like 8 planets in Scorpio, and if you want to go down the woo path for a sec, but really no. And like I said, I'm a redhead. I'm a gregarious person. I have a huge smile and a lot of charisma and stuff. And so I just I forgot. Eric, what was I saying?
Well, I was asking you about your like if you'd become a spiritual person through.
Oh, yeah, spiritual, yeah. And see, to me, that's what spirituality is, right? It's not some dark, serious, dreary affair. It's about joyfulness in life. It's about, for me, spirituality is much more about having a relationship with life, and so yeah, that's always been just inherent with me. That's why I got into the martial arts as a kid. Actually, was more for the meditation and the unlocking the mysteries of the universe, I suppose, rather than learning how to use a sword or something.
So what are the mysteries right now that you're trying to unlock for yourself?
Well, there are so many. I'm always on a quest for improvement and for learning about how I can just live a better life, right? But right now I'm focused more on getting the tools and skills from school to specifically address in a skillful way neurodiverse creatives, to find a way that those tools can work for me along the way. Sure. And that's a side benefit of being in this program, is what I'm learning is certainly improving my life and helping me get along better. But it's cool because just like the martial arts, in fact, very much like the martial arts, it's something that is alive and fresh, and I can take it and live it and pass it on and let someone else make it theirs.
Is there an idea or something that you've been churning around in your mind lately that you're kind of excited about?
You mean creatively or
anything?
So many, man. My biggest thing right now is I would love, this is the biggest thing, and I'm talking to the right person right here. I would love to get my show in order. It's been so many years I should have been podcasting or something of the like. And I love it. And so I want to create, I want that to be a part of my career. I love the idea of coaching, and I want that to be a part of things too, but I don't necessarily need to do that in the traditional sense. I think there's ways to coach kind of in the same ways maybe you are. And so I'm trying to get my stuff together to be successful in doing something a lot like what you're doing.
Have you ever thought about
doing
a almost like combined ADHD TBI? Because I know that there's, as you mentioned, there's a lot of overlap, and I think that it's so interesting how siloed sort of different domains of, even just neurodivergence can be. It's or different areas of mental health, right? I remember 10 years ago having a conversation with a well-known psychologist sharing that I thought that there's a lot of overlap between autism and ADHD.
Oh yeah.
And they didn't get it. They were like, wait, what do you mean? Like, and now it's like everyone's talking about this, and it's like, but when these different like worlds don't talk to each other, we're missing out, So when you can bring that convergence of your life experience together, I think that's where we really can serve the most people.
Oh yeah, man, that's magic. I love it. And I agree with you. I'm finding that I am almost certainly on the spectrum myself, even though I don't have an official diagnosis. And I did just have an interview with this great guy who has a channel called The Aspie World. His name's Dan. And that show should be out on my channel pretty soon. And he has autism, and he's an autism advocate. And he understands that he also has ADHD, and he understands that crossover. And a lot of his work is about that. And it was just a delight to see another person being very successful in creating that community for himself in that way. That's why I've started with the creative neurodiversity channel name, because I don't want it to be limited to just ADHD. And I've been struggling to find the right way to market that.
Well, I think put it out there and, be receptive to that feedback. And here is one way. So what is the channel called?
Right now, it's Creative Neurodiversity on YouTube.
It could be different tomorrow, though.
Yeah, totally. That's what's creative about neurodiversity.
Creative Neurodiversity, and we'll get a link to that in the show notes. Jason, thank you so much for coming on and sharing your story. I really, really do appreciate it. Is there any kind of final thoughts you want to share with my listeners?
Well, Eric, thank you so much for having me here. You know what the good doctor says, time is a wibbly wobbly kind of thing. And so telling my story is never easy. So thanks for leading me along there. And hopefully you and your viewers or listeners got something valuable out of my story. And I really appreciate your time. And thank you so much for being a model of encouragement. And I really appreciate what you have done, what you're doing, and will do in the future for the whole community. Thanks for having me here, Eric.
You are welcome. And thanks for all those kind words and for what you are on your path towards doing. So kudos to you, and I wish you all the best. Thanks so much.
Cheers.
This is Eric Tivers. Thank you for listening, and congratulations for making it to the end. ADHD Rewired is more than just a podcast. We are a community focused on learning, growing, and connection. The website is ADHDrewired.com. You can find time-stamped summaries and additional resources for each episode. Apply to join our free and secret Facebook community. Learn more about our award-winning intensive online video-based coaching and accountability groups. Join the Adult Study Hall virtual co-working membership community. Find all the other podcasts on the ADHD Rewired Podcast Network. Sign up for my email newsletter to get exclusive content that you won't hear anywhere else. And use the search tool to find episodes on specific topics. You can do all of this at ADHDrewired.com. While you're there, click on the Patreon button. If you are a regular listener, consider making a monthly contribution by becoming a patron. If you are able to financially support my work, it would mean a lot. This show is free to you, the listener, but it's not free to produce. Plus, patrons get cool perks like ad-free episodes and access to recordings of coaching calls, and $25 a month patrons can join me once a month for a group coaching call. You can follow me on Twitter at Eric Tivers. You can like our Facebook page at facebook.com/ADHD Rewired. If you're a coach, therapist, or related professional, connect with me on LinkedIn at linkedin.com/Eric Tivers. Subscribe to ADHD Rewired on YouTube to see selective interviews and other videos I've made. Podcasts change lives. You can make a difference in someone's life by spreading the word about this podcast. Mention it in your online communities on Facebook, Twitter, Reddit, or wherever you hang out online. And be sure to share it with your friends, family, your therapists, your coaches, doctors, siblings, parents. And if you, your coach, therapist, doctor, or ADHD support group leader would like a pack of podcast postcards to hand out, you can request those at the website, ADHDrewired.com. If you are a member of CHAD, ADA, or any other ADHD support group, please be sure to tell them about this show and all the shows on the ADHD Rewired Podcast Network. You can even show them how to download it on their phone. And if you really loved this particular episode, please hit share on your podcast player. I'm only one person, and I do count on you to help spread this message. One of the biggest things that you can do to support this podcast and help other people discover it is to leave an honest rating and review on Apple Podcasts or any other app that supports reviews. And don't forget to hit subscribe so new episodes are automatically pushed to your favorite podcast app. Looking for more ways to listen and learn? Get a free audiobook and a 30-day free trial at Audible by going to audibletrial.com/ADHD Rewired. Here is my list of must-listen-to audiobooks updated July 2021. Nonviolent Communication by Marshall Rosenberg. Attached by Amir Levin and Rachel Heller. Atomic Habits by James Clear. The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team by Patrick Lencioni. Crucial Conversations by Carrie Patterson. The Coaching Habit by Michael Stainer. The Body Keeps Score by Bessel van der Kolk. Rest by Alex Sujong Kim Pang. The 5-Second Rule by Mel Robbins. Make It Stick. The Science of Successful Learning by Peter Brown. The Productivity Project by Chris Bailey. Meditation for Fidgety Skeptics by Dan Harris. Change Your Questions, Change Your Life by Marilee G. Adams. I always recommend to my coaches and admin that they read that book. The One Thing by Gary Keller, a required reading for all of our coaching group members. Procrastinate on Purpose by Rory Baden. The 4 Tendencies by Gretchen Rubin. The Art of Asking by Amanda Palmer. And if you're looking for something a little bit more magical, I have fallen in love with the Harry Potter series, and the narrator, Jim Dale, is amazing. And of course, if you haven't yet boarded the Brene Brown bus, all of her stuff is great, starting with Gifts of Imperfection, Daring Greatly, Rising Strong, and The Power of Vulnerability. And if you're an entrepreneur or leader, be sure to check out her book, Dare to Lead. Do you have something that you would like to share? Click on the podcast tab at ADHD Rewired. Click the button to be a guest at the top of the page and schedule a 15-minute interview. This is Eric Tibbers, reminding you to keep learning, growing, and connecting. Self-care is not selfish. No matter what you get done or don't get done, you are still enough. And no matter how hard it feels, we can do hard things. And we don't need to do them in the hardest way possible. Thanks for listening. I'll catch you next week.